The wind howled through the San Juan Mountains like a wounded animal, carrying with it the promise of the worst storm Colorado Territory had seen in a decade. In the valley below, Larkspur Gulch huddled against the mountainside, its wooden buildings creaking under the weight of accumulating snow. Cole Hart pulled his collar higher against the bite of December cold, his boots crunching through fresh powder as he made his way down Main Street. At 32, he cut a solitary figure tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar through his left eyebrow that gave him a perpetual look of skepticism. The townspeople gave him a wide berth, their whispers following in his wake like autumn leaves. "That's him," muttered Mrs. Abigail Thornton to her companion outside the Mercantile. "The one from Silver Creek. They say he was there when the bank—" "Hush now, Abigail," interrupted Mrs. Dorothy Finch, though her eyes tracked Cole with equal suspicion. Nothing was ever proven. Cole heard them, he always did, but kept walking. 3 years in Larkspur Gulch, and the ghost of Silver Creek still haunted him. He'd been driving cattle in the high country that day, miles from any bank. But truth had a way of mattering less than a good story in towns like this. The emergency meeting at the town hall was already underway when Cole shouldered through the door. Sheriff Amos Hale, a weathered man with silver threading through his mustache, stood at the front addressing a crowd of worried faces. Railroad bridge at Devil's Canyon washed out 2 days back. The sheriff was saying, "Supply train stuck on the other side. With this storm bearing down, we need to make arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" demanded Edwin Pike from his seat in the front row. The Mercantile owner's son sat rigid in his pressed suit, looking as out of place among the ranchers and miners as a peacock among crows. "Shelter arrangements," Sheriff Hale replied grimly. "The boarding house lost half its kitchen to a fire last week. We're short on rooms, and this storm's fixing to trap folks where they stand." Cole found a spot against the back wall, arms crossed. Through the crowd, he spotted her Ellen May Reed, the schoolteacher, sitting ramrod straight near the window. She wore a simple gray dress that had seen better days, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that did nothing to diminish the determined set of her jaw. At 28, she was what the town ladies called an old maid, though Cole suspected that had more to do with her rejection of Edwin Pike's advances than any failing on her part. "We'll take in the widow Hanson," announced Mrs. Thornton, rising from her seat with self-important authority. The head of the Ladies' Temperance Society never missed a chance to display her Christian charity, especially when others were watching. "The Millers can stay with us," added another voice. One by one, the townspeople sorted themselves, families opening their homes to neighbors. Cole watched Ellen shift uncomfortably in her seat. The teacher's quarters had been having trouble with frozen locks. He'd heard, and Miss Reed had been the last to arrive from Missouri that fall, leaving her with the worst room. "What about Hart?" someone asked, and the hall fell silent. "I was heading back to my ranch," Cole said evenly. "Got caught by the early snow. I can bed down in the livery." "In this weather," Sheriff Hale shook his head. "That roof won't hold if we get the snow they're predicting. You'd freeze to death." "And Miss Reed, Mrs." Finch's voice carried a note of false concern. "I heard the teacher's quarters are quite compromised." Ellen stood, her chin lifting slightly. "I'll manage. Thank you. I always do." Edwin Pike rose from his chair, turning to face Ellen with what he probably thought was a gallant smile. "Miss Reed, I insist you accept the hospitality of our home. Mother would be delighted." "That's kind of you, Mr. Pike," Ellen interrupted, her voice cool as spring water. "But I wouldn't want to impose." Cole saw the flash of anger in Edwin's eyes before he smoothed it away. The man had been pursuing Ellen since she'd arrived, growing more insistent with each polite refusal. Sheriff Hale cleared his throat. "There is one option, the old ranger cabin by Black Creek. It's sturdy, got a good fireplace, plenty of wood already cut, big enough for 2 people, if they're willing to share." The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. "Surely you're not suggesting—" Mrs. Thornton began. Scandalized. I'm suggesting, the sheriff said firmly, that we have 2 people needing shelter and 1 available cabin, unless someone else has room. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. I'll take the livery, Cole said again. You'll take pneumonia, is what you'll take. Sheriff Hale shot back. This ain't about propriety, folks. It's about survival. Ellen stood slowly, gathering her worn coat around her shoulders. If Mr. Hart has no objection, neither do I. I assume we can arrange for appropriate supervision. The crowd erupted in whispers. Edwin's face flushed red as a sunset. Supervision? Cole asked. One eyebrow raised. Old Pete can set up on the covered porch. Sheriff Hale suggested quickly. Man's too stubborn to stay with his daughter in town anyway. Says he likes the quiet. It was a flimsy solution to a problem that shouldn't have existed, but the wind chose that moment to rattle the windows hard enough to make the glass sing, reminding everyone that nature cared nothing for social conventions. It's settled then, Sheriff Hale said before anyone could object further. Hart, Miss Reed, you'd best gather what you need. Storm's moving fast. As the crowd dispersed in a flurry of disapproving murmurs and knowing looks, Cole found himself walking beside Ellen toward the door. You didn't have to agree to this, he said quietly. She glanced at him, and he caught a flash of something amusement in her brown eyes. Mr. Hart, I've survived a husband's death, a 1,000-mile journey alone, and 3 months of Edwin Pike's attention. I think I can survive sharing a cabin with you. Outside, the snow had begun to fall in earnest, fat flakes that stuck to everything they touched. Cole watched Ellen pull her thin coat tighter and made a decision. Wait here, he said, ducking back into the hall. He returned with a heavy wool blanket from the emergency supplies. You'll need this. She looked at him for a long moment before accepting it. Thank you. They parted ways to gather their belongings, agreeing to meet at the cabin before full dark. As Cole loaded his saddlebags, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, like a stream changing course after a flood. The ranger cabin sat a mile from town, tucked into a grove of pine trees that provided some shelter from the wind. It was a simple structure, 1 main room with a fireplace, a small lean-to for storage, and a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Someone had already been there to prepare. Smoke curled from the chimney, and lamplight glowed warm through the windows. Ellen arrived just as Cole was unsaddling his horse in the small stable attached to the cabin. She drove a borrowed wagon loaded with supplies, handling the reins with surprising competence. Let me help with those, Cole offered, reaching for the heavy crates. I can manage, she said, then paused. But thank you. They worked in companionable silence, unloading provisions while the snow continued to fall. Old Pete appeared as promised, setting up a bedroll on the porch with the determined air of a man proving a point. Don't mind me, he wheezed through his gray beard. I'll be out here keeping things proper-like, though what fool thinks either of you needs watching is beyond me. Inside the cabin, the awkwardness settled over them like a heavy coat. The space was larger than Cole had expected, but still intimate. 1 room with a bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, and a rocking chair by the fireplace. Someone had strung a rope across one corner and hung a blanket for a makeshift privacy screen. I'll take the floor, Cole said immediately. Ellen busied herself unpacking supplies, not meeting his eyes. We'll work something out. First things first, are you hungry? Cole realized he hadn't eaten since morning. I could eat. He watched her move around the small kitchen area with practiced efficiency, noting the way she tested the weight of the water bucket before lifting it, the careful way she measured out coffee grounds. That's going to be strong enough to float a horseshoe, he observed as she added another scoop. She looked up, startled, then surprised him with a small smile. My late husband always said I made coffee that could wake the dead. I suppose some habits die hard. I'm sorry, Cole said. About your husband. Ellen's hands stilled for a moment. William was a good man. just not strong enough for frontier life. The fever took him outside independence. She said it simply, without self-pity, and Cole found himself respecting her more for it. They ate in relative quiet beans and cornbread, simple but filling. The wind picked up outside, whistling through the trees and making the cabin walls creak. Old Pete's snoring drifted through the walls, an oddly reassuring sound. "Why didn't you go back?" Cole asked suddenly. "After your husband died. Why continue west?" Ellen considered the question, sipping her coffee. "Where would I go? My parents are gone. William's family made it clear they blamed me for taking him away from Boston. And I'd heard schools out here needed teachers." She shrugged. "It seemed like a place where I could be useful." "The children are lucky to have you," Cole said, meaning it. "Mrs. Sampson says young Tom's reading has improved considerably. You know Tom. Helped his PA bring in the harvest last fall. Good family." They lapsed into silence again, but it was less strained now. Ellen produced a book from her bag, Emerson's essays, and settled into the rocking chair to read by lamplight. Cole busied himself checking the wood supply and securing the shutters against the growing storm. It was when Ellen stood to prepare for sleep that the awkwardness returned in full force. They carefully avoided looking at each other as she stepped behind the blanket screen to change into her nightclothes. Cole turned his back, laying out his bedroll by the fire with exaggerated care. "Mr. Hart," Ellen's voice came from behind the screen. "This is ridiculous. We're both adults, and this storm might last days. We need to be practical." "What do you suggest?" She emerged in a modest nightgown, covered by a wool wrapper, her hair now in a long braid over one shoulder. "You take the bed tonight, I'll take it tomorrow. We'll alternate. Fair." Cole started to protest, but she held up a hand. "I've slept on harder surfaces than a cabin floor, I assure you, and you've been out in the cold all day." He knew arguing would be pointless. "All right, but I'm banking the fire first and checking the stable." When he returned, snow dusting his shoulders. Ellen was already settled on the makeshift pallet, the blanket he'd given her earlier wrapped around her. She'd left the lamp burning low on the table. "Good night, Mr. Hart." "Cole," he said. "If we're going to be cabin mates, you might as well call me Cole." "Good night, Cole," she amended. "And you may call me Ellen." As he lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the storm gather strength outside, Cole found himself thinking about Silver Creek again. He'd spent 3 years running from those rumors, keeping people at arm's length. But here, in this small cabin with this unexpected woman, the past seemed less important than the present need to simply survive what was coming. The wind howled, the snow fell, and somewhere in the darkness, wolves called to each other across the valley. But inside the cabin, warmth and light held the wild at bay, at least for now. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. He could already imagine the gossip that would spread through town like wildfire. But tonight, with the storm raging and Ellen's quiet breathing filling the space, Cole allowed himself something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Cole woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone trying very hard to be quiet. Gray dawn light filtered through the frost-covered windows, and the storm that had raged all night had settled into a steady snowfall. Ellen stood at the stove, her back to him, wrestling with the coffee pot. He watched her pour water into it, then add what looked like half the coffee supply. "You weren't joking about that coffee," he said. She jumped, nearly dropping the pot. "I didn't mean to wake you." "Storm woke me." Cole swung his legs out of bed, then remembered he was only wearing his union suit. He grabbed his pants from the chair. "I'll, check on the horses." "Breakfast will be ready when you get back," Ellen said, determinedly focused on the stove. Outside, the world had transformed into a white wilderness. Snow came up to Cole's knees as he waded to the stable, and it was still falling thick and fast. Old Pete was already up, huddled on the porch with a pipe that refused to stay lit in the wind. "Hell of a storm," Pete observed. "Ain't seen one like this since '73. Cole grunted agreement, pushing through to the stable. The horses were restless but unharmed, and he spent time calming them, checking their feed and water. When he returned to the cabin, stamping snow from his boots, the smell of bacon and biscuits made his stomach rumble. "How does it look out there?" Ellen asked, setting a plate in front of him. "We're not going anywhere for a while," Cole admitted. "Trail's completely blocked. Town might as well be 100 miles away." She nodded, unsurprised, and poured coffee that could indeed float a horseshoe. They ate in companionable silence until a sharp knock at the door broke the peace. Sheriff Hale stood outside, snow-covered and grim-faced, accompanied by Reverend Paul Whitfield and, unfortunately, Mrs. Thornton. "Morning, folks," the sheriff said, "just checking that everyone survived the night." "As you can see, we're fine," Ellen said coolly. "Mrs. Thornton pushed past the men, her eyes taking in every detail of the cabin's interior like a hawk spotting mice. "Well, I suppose it's adequate, though highly irregular." "The storm is what's irregular, Abigail," Sheriff Hale said tiredly. "Cole, I need to ask you planning to head to your ranch when this clears?" "Was thinking about it." "Don't. We've got word the Garrett Pass is completely blocked. Lost 2 men trying to get through yesterday. You'd best stay put until we can organize a proper clearing crew." Cole felt the weight of that settle on him. Days, maybe weeks, trapped here while the town gossips had a field day. "And Miss Reed?" Reverend Whitfield spoke up, his thin face creased with concern. "The Ladies' Society wants to assure you that your situation is understood to be temporary. However, they feel it would be appropriate to establish some guidelines." "Guidelines?" Ellen's voice could have chilled the coffee. "For propriety's sake," Mrs. Thornton interjected. "Separate eating times, no unnecessary conversation. Certainly no—" "Mrs. Thornton," Cole interrupted, his patience finally fraying. "We're 2 grown people trying not to freeze to death. We'll manage our own guidelines." The woman's face flushed. "Well, I'm only thinking of Miss Reed's reputation." "My reputation is my concern," Ellen said firmly. "Thank you for checking on us. I'm sure you have other families to visit." After they left, Cole and Ellen stood awkwardly in the sudden quiet. "Guidelines," Ellen muttered, then surprised him by laughing a rich, genuine sound. "Separate eating times. Should we draw up a schedule?" "You eat at 6, I'll eat at 7, Cole said dryly. "We'll communicate by written notes only. Post it on the door, of course, no unnecessary conversation." They looked at each other, and the absurdity of it all struck them both. Cole found himself grinning, something he hadn't done in months. "More coffee?" Ellen asked. "Or would that constitute unnecessary conversation?" "Definitely necessary," Cole assured her. The day settled into a rhythm. They divided the chores without much discussion. Cole tending the fire and bringing in wood. Ellen managing the cooking and keeping the cabin tidy. When the wind died down enough, Cole cleared a path to the stable and woodpile, while Ellen mended a tear in her spare dress. It was late afternoon, the light already fading, when Cole noticed Ellen opening her trunk and carefully removing something wrapped in oilcloth. "What's that?" he asked, before remembering unnecessary conversation. Ellen unwrapped the bundle, revealing a well-maintained rifle. "My father's Winchester. He taught me to shoot when I was 12. Cole's eyebrows rose. "That's a fine piece." "He was a sheriff in Missouri before the war," Ellen said, checking the weapon with practiced movements. "Said a woman should know how to protect herself. Smart man." "He was." She rewrapped the rifle carefully. "I haven't had cause to use it, thankfully, but with wolves about—" "You heard them too. Hard not to. They sound hungry, as if summoned by their words." A long howl echoed across the valley, answered by another. Closer this time. Cole moved to the window, peering out into the gathering darkness. "They're getting bold," he said, Must be a hard winter already if they're coming this close to town. Ellen joined him at the window, standing close enough that he caught the scent of lavender soap. Will they come here? Not likely. The fire and lamplight will keep them back, but I'll keep watch tonight, just in case. We'll take turns, Ellen said firmly. You need sleep too. He started to argue, then saw the set of her jaw and thought better of it. All right, wake me at midnight. The evening passed quietly. Ellen read aloud from Emerson at Cole's request, her voice smooth and cultured in the lamplight. He found himself watching her face as she read, the way expressions flickered across it with the words, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." She read, then paused. Do you think that's true? Cole considered. Might be easier to just be what folks expect. Easier, yes, but would it be living? Speaking from experience, Ellen closed the book. They wanted me to remarry quickly after William died, his brother, specifically. A convenient arrangement that would keep his money in the family. Her smile was sharp as a blade. I declined. Good for you. Was it? Sometimes I wonder if I'm just stubborn. Nothing wrong with knowing your own mind. She studied him. What about you? What does the world constantly try to make you? An outlaw, Cole said without hesitation. Been 3 years, and folks still look at me like I might rob them at Sunday dinner. But you were nowhere near that bank. You believe that? Yes, simple, direct, no hesitation. Cole felt something tight in his chest loosen. Why? Ellen shrugged. You have honest hands. Honest hands? My father always said you could tell a lot about a man by his hands. Yours are calloused from work, not violence. Besides, she added with a slight smile, a real outlaw would have taken the bed both nights. The tension broke, and Cole chuckled. Maybe I'm just a polite outlaw. They prepared for sleep with less awkwardness than the night before. Ellen took the bed as agreed. Cole made his pallet by the fire, but sleep eluded him, his mind too full of the day's strange domesticity. Near midnight, he heard Ellen stirring. I'm awake, he said quietly. You can sleep. The wolves sound closer. She was right. The howling had intensified, and Cole could hear old Pete on the porch, muttering and loading his shotgun. I'll check the stable, Cole said, pulling on his boots. I'm coming with you. He looked at her fully dressed, her father's rifle in hand, and didn't argue. The cold hit them like a physical blow. Snow still fell steadily, and the tracks around the cabin told a concerning story. The pack had circled twice, testing for weaknesses. In the stable, the horses were wild-eyed and stamping. Cole soothed them while Ellen stood watch, her rifle held with easy competence. There, she whispered, pointing. Yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness beyond the stable door. 1 wolf, then 3, then more. The pack leader was massive, its gray coat almost invisible against the snow. Don't shoot unless they charge, Cole murmured. Might scare them off if we... The leader stepped forward, lips pulled back in a snarl. Ellen's rifle cracked once, the shot striking the snow at the wolf's feet. The pack scattered, melting back into the forest like smoke. Nice shooting, Cole said. I aimed for the snow. Ellen replied calmly. No need to kill when a warning will do. They stayed in the stable another hour, watching. But the wolves didn't return. When they finally made it back to the cabin, old Pete greeted them with approval. Heard that shot? Good thinking. Missy, show 'em you mean business without wasting ammunition. Inside, warming by the fire, Cole made a decision. He reached for his saddlebags and pulled out something he'd been carrying for months, a spare key. This opens the tack room at Murphy's Livery, he said, handing it to Ellen. If you ever need a safe place, day or night, Murphy knows to let you be. Ellen took the key, understanding the weight of the gesture. Why? Because a woman who can handle a rifle like that shouldn't have to put up with Edwin Pike's persistence. Cole said, or anyone else's. She turned the key over in her hands. This is unnecessary conversation, Mr. Hart. Definitely, he agreed solemnly. Later, lying by the dying fire, Cole heard Ellen's voice soft in the darkness. Cole, thank you for the key, for believing I can take care of myself. You already proved that, he said. I just provided options. Still, it's been a long time since someone offered help without expecting something in return. Cole stared at the ceiling, choosing his words carefully. We're going to be here a while. Ellen, might as well look out for each other. Yes, she said quietly. I suppose we might as well. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the mountain. But inside the cabin, something had shifted. Not quite friendship, not yet trust, but a recognition between two people who understood what it meant to stand alone. And maybe, Cole thought as sleep finally claimed him, that was enough for now. The fourth day dawned clear and bitter cold, the kind of morning where breath froze before it left your lips. Cole woke to find Ellen already up, kneading dough for the day's bread, her movements efficient despite the early hour. Couldn't sleep, he asked, pulling on his boots. The silence woke me, she said. Storm's finally passed. It was true. After days of howling wind, the quiet felt almost oppressive. Cole stepped onto the porch where old Pete sat bundled in blankets, looking like a grumpy bear. Morning, Pete. Pete grunted. Reverend was by earlier. Whole delegation of busybodies. Actually, I told him you were both still sleeping. He spat tobacco juice into the snow. They forced the cowboy to share a cabin with the old maid. She turned his life into heaven. Cole's head snapped around. What? Pete chuckled, a raspy sound. That's what I told him. Should have seen Mrs. Thornton's face, purple as a spring turnip. Pete, you can't say things like that. Why not? It's true. Ain't it haven't seen you this peaceful in 3 years? And Miss Ellen there, she's smiling more than a schoolmarm has a right to. Cole felt heat creep up his neck. It's just, we're making the best of things. Sure you are. Pete's grin revealed several missing teeth. Making the best of things? That what they're calling it now? Inside, Ellen had breakfast-ready cornmeal porridge with the last of their preserved berries. They ate quietly, both aware of how their supplies were dwindling. We'll need to try for town soon. Ellen observed, tomorrow, maybe, I'll break trail today. See how bad it is. I'll come with you. Ellen, 2 people can break trail faster than 1, she said reasonably. And I need the exercise. This cabin is starting to feel very small. He couldn't argue with that. They bundled up and ventured out together, taking turns leading through the hip-deep snow. The work was exhausting but companionable, and Cole found himself enjoying her company more than he'd enjoyed anyone's in years. They'd made it halfway to town when they heard the bells, the emergency pattern that meant trouble. Fire, Ellen asked. Wrong rhythm. Cole's face went grim. That's the avalanche warning. They hurried back to find Pete standing on the porch, looking toward the mountains. Big slide up on Garrett Pass, he reported. Took out part of the mining camp. Cole's mind raced. The mining camp meant the North Star operation. If the avalanche had hit the storage sheds. The explosives, Ellen breathed, following his thought. They store dynamite up there. We need to get to town, Cole said. They'll need every able body for rescue work. The journey that had taken an hour in good weather took 3 in the snow. When they finally reached Larkspur Gulch, they found chaos. Men were organizing rescue parties while women prepared medical supplies. Sheriff Hale stood in the center of it all, dispatching groups with grim efficiency. Cole, thank God, he called. Need you to lead a team up the East Trail. You know it better than most. What about? Cole glanced at Ellen. I'll help Dr. Morrison prepare for casualties, she said quickly. Go! Cole spent the rest of the day digging through snow and debris, pulling out injured miners and searching for the missing. By the time he returned to town, exhausted and half frozen, the sun was setting. He found Ellen in the church, which had been converted to a makeshift hospital. She moved between patients with calm efficiency, cleaning wounds and offering comfort. Her dress was stained with blood and dirt, her hair escaping its usual tidy bun, but she'd never looked more capable. "How many?" he asked when she finally noticed him. 12 injured, 3 still missing," she said quietly. "And rumors flying thick as the snow." "Rumors?" Ellen glanced around, then drew him aside. "Some are saying it wasn't an accident, that someone set off dynamite deliberately to cause the slide." "Why would anyone—" Cole stopped. The North Star Mine's monthly gold shipment. It would have been in those sheds, waiting for the trails to clear. "Edwin Pike's been asking questions." Ellen continued, "About you, about where you were this morning." Cole felt the old familiar anger rise. "Of course he has." "I told him you were with me, breaking trail." He didn't like that answer. They were interrupted by a commotion at the door. Edwin Pike himself entered, flanked by 2 men Cole didn't recognize, hard-looking men with the kind of faces that had seen too many wanted posters. "Sheriff," Edwin called out. "These gentlemen have information about the avalanche." Sheriff Hale looked tired as he joined them. "What kind of information?" One of the strangers, a man with red hair and cold eyes, spoke up. "We saw tracks leading up to the blast site. Boot prints. Looked like someone was definitely up there before the slide." "Could have been anyone," the sheriff said. "Lots of folks use that trail." "Not in this snow." Red Hair insisted. "These were fresh, and we found this." He produced a glove-worn leather, nothing special except for the distinctive patch on the palm. Cole's blood ran cold. He had a pair just like them, had been wearing them this morning, in fact. "Interesting," Edwin said, his eyes finding Cole across the room. "Don't you have gloves like that?" "Hart." "Half the men in town have gloves like that," Ellen said sharply. "Murphy sells them by the dozen." Still, Edwin persisted. "It raises questions. Where exactly were you this morning?" "Hart." "With me," Ellen repeated firmly. "As I already told you." Edwin's smile was unpleasant. "Yes, how convenient. The 2 social outcasts providing alibis for each other." "That's enough. Edwin," Sheriff Hale warned. But the damage was done. Cole could see it in the faces around them, the old suspicions rising like floodwater. 3 years of keeping his head down, working hard, staying out of trouble, and it took just one suggestion to bring it all back. "I should go," Cole said quietly. "Yes, you should," Edwin agreed. "In fact, I think it would be best if—" The church door burst open. Young Tom Sampson ran in, gasping for breath. "Sheriff, they found another survivor, but he's trapped. Bad says there's more dynamite in there. Unstable. Could go any minute." Sheriff Hale grabbed his coat. "I need volunteers. Men who aren't afraid of—" "I'll go," Cole said immediately. "No," Edwin protested. "We can't trust—" "I'll go too," Ellen announced, already reaching for her coat. "Ellen, no," Cole began. "I have medical training," she said crisply. "If someone's injured, you'll need me." Sheriff Hale made a quick decision. "Fine, Cole, Miss Reed, you're with me. Edwin, organize the evacuation of nearby buildings in case that dynamite blows." The ride up the mountain was treacherous in the darkness. Ellen rode behind Cole, her arms tight around his waist as they navigated the icy trail. At the mine, they found chaos lanterns swinging wildly in the wind, men shouting over the creaking of unstable snow. The survivor was trapped in what remained of a storage shed, pinned by heavy beams. Worse, cases of dynamite were scattered throughout the wreckage, some already showing signs of sweating a dangerous instability. "We need to shore up those beams before we can move him," Sheriff Hale assessed. They worked by lantern light, every movement careful, every sound making them freeze. Ellen crawled into the narrow space to tend the injured man while Cole and the sheriff worked to stabilize the structure.
"Miss!"
The trapped miner gasped.
"You shouldn't be here. It's gonna blow."
"Hush," Ellen said gently.
"Save your strength. What's your name?"
Frank Morrison." "Well, Frank, I'm Ellen, and we're going to get you out. Can you feel your legs?" Cole listened to her calm voice as he worked, marveling at her composure. Most men would have balked at crawling into that death trap, but Ellen hadn't hesitated. They were almost ready to pull Frank free when they heard a sharp crack from above. More snow shifting, ready to slide.
"Everyone out!"
Sheriff Hale shouted. "Not without Frank," Ellen said firmly. "Ellen, move!" Cole dove forward as the roof began to buckle, covering Ellen and Frank with his body as debris rained down. The world exploded in dust and noise, and then sudden, ominous silence. "Cole," Ellen's voice, muffled but alive. "I'm okay. You—"
"Yes, but—"
She shifted beneath him.
"You're bleeding."
He could feel it now. Warm wetness on his shoulder where something had struck him. But Frank was groaning, alive, and that was what mattered. "Can you move?" he asked Ellen. "I think so. But Cole, your shoulder—" "Later. Let's get Frank out first." Working together, they managed to extract the injured miner. Sheriff Hale and the others pulled them all free just as another section of roof collapsed. The remaining dynamite, miraculously, remained stable. Back at the church, Ellen insisted on treating Cole's shoulder herself. The cut was deep but clean, and she worked with gentle efficiency.
"That was foolish,"
she said quietly as she cleaned the wound. "Which part?" "Shielding us like that. You could have been killed." "So could you, but you went in anyway." She paused in her work, meeting his eyes. "Frank would have died. Most people would have let him—" "I'm not most people." "No," Cole agreed softly. "You're not." Edwin appeared as Ellen was finishing the bandage, his face dark with frustration. "Morrison's talking," he announced. "Says he saw who set the charges. Red hair, scar on his left cheek." His eyes narrowed. "Claims the man was asking about the gold shipment yesterday in town." Cole felt Ellen's hand still on his shoulder. The description matched Edwin's red-haired companion perfectly. "Interesting," Sheriff Hale said slowly. "Where exactly are those friends of yours?" "Edwin." "I don't know what you mean. The men you brought in earlier, the ones with all the helpful information about boot prints. Seems they've disappeared." Edwin's face went pale, then flushed. "This is Hart's doing somehow. He's turned you all against me." "Only person turning folks against you is yourself." Old Pete spoke up from the doorway. "Been watching you, boy. Watching who you talk to, who you meet with after dark." The room had gone very quiet. Edwin looked around, realizing the tide had turned. "You can't prove anything," he said finally. "Maybe not," Sheriff Hale agreed. "But I think you'd better stay where I can see you until we sort this out." After Edwin was escorted out, Cole found himself alone with Ellen in the quiet corner of the church. She was still working on his bandage, her touch light but sure. "Thank you," he said, "for speaking up, for believing me." "I told you," she said. "You have honest hands." She tied off the bandage. "There. Try not to throw yourself on any more collapsing buildings for at least a week." "I'll do my best." He caught her hand as she moved to stand. "Ellen, what you did tonight, Frank owes you his life." "We did it together," she corrected. "That seems to be becoming a pattern with us." "Not the worst pattern I can think of." She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her face. "No, not the worst at all." Outside, the wind had picked up again, promising more snow. But inside the church, surrounded by those who'd seen their true character tested and proven, Cole felt warmer than he had in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Edwin's associates were still out there, The dynamite remained a threat, and the town's gossips would have a field day with tonight's events. But for now, sitting beside Ellen as she rolled spare bandages with her capable hands, Cole allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he'd found something worth protecting. And if that wasn't heaven compared to the hell of the last 3 years, he didn't know what was. The day after the avalanche, Cole and Ellen returned to the cabin under a gray sky that promised more snow. Old Pete had stayed in town, claiming his rheumatism needed Doc Morrison's attention, though Cole suspected he was giving them space after the previous night's events. They moved around each other with new awareness, the shared danger having stripped away some invisible barrier. When their hands brushed passing the water bucket, neither pulled away quite as quickly as before. "Your shoulder needs checking," Ellen said as they finished the noon meal. "It's fine." Cole, just his name, but the tone brooked no argument. He submitted to her ministrations, sitting still as she unwound the bandage. Her fingers were gentle but sure, and he found himself studying her face as she worked the small furrow between her brows when she concentrated, the way she caught her lower lip between her teeth. "This is healing well," she pronounced. "You were lucky. Had a good nurse." She glanced up, caught him watching her, and color rose in her cheeks. "Any competent person could have—" "Ellen." He caught her hand. "Take the compliment." She stilled, looking at their joined hands. "I'm not used to— That is, it's been a long time since someone saw you," Cole finished quietly. "Not the schoolmarm or the widow or the old maid. Just you." "Yes," the word was barely a whisper. A knock at the door shattered the moment. Ellen pulled away, busying herself with the medical supplies while Cole answered it. Sheriff Hale stood outside with 2 other men, Deputy Ben Watson and, surprisingly, Judge Theodore Blackwood from the county seat. "Cole, Miss Reed." The sheriff nodded. "Mind if we come in? Got some questions need answering." They gathered around the small table, the judge's presence lending weight to what followed. "Frank Morrison's given a full statement." Sheriff Hale began. "Described the man he saw setting charges. We've identified him as Jake Red Pike." Ellen drew in a sharp breath. "Pike is in." "Edwin's older brother," the judge confirmed. "Been wanted in 3 territories for robbery and worse. We believe Edwin's been feeding him information about gold shipments." "Why are you telling us this?" Cole asked, though he suspected he knew. "Because Red Pike's still out there," the sheriff said grimly. "And according to some papers we'd found in Edwin's room, you 2 are problems he means to solve." Cole felt Ellen tense beside him. "What kind of papers?" The judge produced a letter, handling it carefully. "Plans, mostly. Frame Hart for the avalanche. Ruin Miss Reed's reputation completely. Force her to accept Edwin's protection." When that failed, he shook his head. "Let's just say Red Pike doesn't leave loose ends." "You're saying we're targets," Ellen said steadily. "I'm saying you need to be careful, both of you. We've got men watching the trails, but Pike knows this mountain better than most." After they left, Cole and Ellen sat in heavy silence. The cabin that had felt like a haven now seemed fragile, exposed. "I should leave," Cole said finally. "Draw them away from you." "Don't!" Ellen's voice was fierce. "Don't you dare run off playing hero. We're safer together." "Ellen, I mean it. I won't be—" She stopped, took a breath. "I won't be left behind again. Not now." The weight of what she wasn't saying hung between them. Cole stood, pacing to the window. "If something happened to you because of me, because of you," Ellen rose too, anger flashing in her eyes. "This started because I refused Edwin Pike, because I dared to say no to a man who thinks he's entitled to whatever he wants. You're not the cause. Cole, you're just convenient for his story." Still nothing. She crossed to him, laying her hand on his arm. "We stand together or not at all. That's what partners do." "Partners?" The word came out rougher than he intended. "Aren't we after everything?" Cole turned from the window to face her fully. In the dim afternoon light, with her hair coming loose from its pins and that determined set to her jaw, she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Ellen," he began, then stopped. What could he offer her? A man with a clouded past and uncertain future. She seemed to read his thoughts. "I know who you are. Cole Hart. I know what you've been accused of and what you've actually done. I know you brought me firewood when you thought I wasn't looking. I know you gave me that key not to create obligation, but to provide options. I know you covered Frank and me with your own body when the roof came down. Anyone would have." "No," she said firmly. "They wouldn't have." "You're a good man, Cole. The best I've known. And if you're about to tell me you're not worthy or some such nonsense, I'll make you drink my coffee for a week straight." Despite everything, he found himself smiling. "That's a serious threat." "I'm a serious woman." "Yes," he agreed softly. "You are." They stood close now, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes, feel the warmth radiating from her. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he raised his hand to her cheek. "Ellen," he said again, and this time her name held everything he couldn't yet say. She leaned into his touch. "I know," she whispered. "I know." The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious as spun glass. Then, from outside, came the sound that made them both freeze horses, several of them moving fast. Cole pushed Ellen behind him, reaching for his rifle. Through the window, he could see riders approaching through the snow, 4 men led by a familiar figure with distinctive red hair. "The root cellar," Cole said urgently. "Go!" "Not without you." "Ellen, please, if they take me, you can get to town, get help." "Together or not at all," she repeated, grabbing her father's Winchester. "Remember?" There was no time to argue. Red Pike and his men were already surrounding the cabin. Cole could hear them on the porch, at the back door. "Hart," Red Pike's voice was eerily similar to his brother's, but rougher, meaner. "Come on out, we got business to discuss." "Plenty comfortable in here, thanks," Cole called back. "See, that's unfortunate, because if you don't come out, I'll have to come in, and the lady might get hurt in the confusion." Ellen stepped up beside Cole, rifle steady. "Let them come," she said quietly. Through the window, Cole saw Pike gesture to his men. 2 moved toward the stable, likely to steal or harm the horses. Another was working his way around back. "They're going to rush us." Cole murmured, "When they do." The attack came suddenly. The back door splintered open, and Cole spun, firing. His shot caught the intruder in the shoulder, spinning him back outside. At the same moment, the front windows shattered. Ellen's rifle cracked, and Cole heard cursing from the porch. She'd winged one of them at least, but they were outnumbered, and Pike's men were moving to flank them. "The table," Ellen said, and together they flipped it for cover just as more shots peppered the walls where they'd been standing. Cole's mind raced. They couldn't hold out long, not against 4, now 3 armed men. Their ammunition was limited, and Pike could simply wait them out or burn them out. Then, through the chaos, came a new sound, a rifle shot from outside, but not aimed at the cabin. One of Pike's men cried out. "What the—" Pike's curse was cut short by another shot. Then another. "That's Sheriff Hale," Ellen breathed. It was the sheriff, along with Deputy Watson and several townsmen, had arrived. The gunfight shifted outside as Pike's men scrambled for cover. "Stay down," Cole told Ellen, but she was already moving, using the distraction to get a better angle on the front door. The battle was brief but intense. When the gun smoke cleared, 2 of Pike's men were down, another had fled, and Red Pike himself lay wounded in the snow. Sheriff Hale's rifle trained on him. "Heard you might have trouble," the sheriff said as Cole and Ellen emerged. "Old Pete saw riders heading this way. Raised the alarm." "Pete," Cole shook his head. "Guess his rheumatism improved?" Miraculous recovery, the sheriff agreed dryly. As they loaded Pike and his men onto horses, the wounded to face justice, the others to face judgment of a different kind, Ellen stood close to Cole, their shoulders touching.
So much for our quiet cabin, she said.
Quiet's overrated anyway.
She looked up at him. Cole, what I said before, about partners.
Yes, I meant it, all of it. He took her hand, there in front of the sheriff and the deputies and the whole world. So did I. Sheriff Hale cleared his throat. Well then, suppose we should get back to town. There'll be statements to make. And, he paused, a slow smile crossing his weathered face. And I suppose folks will want to hear how the schoolmarm and the cowboy ran off a whole gang of outlaws. Together, Ellen said firmly. Together, Cole agreed. As they prepared for the trip to town, Cole caught sight of their reflection in the broken window, two people standing side by side, battered but unbroken, no longer alone against the world. Red Pike had come to destroy them. Instead, he'd only proven what they were beginning to understand themselves, that together, they were stronger than any storm. The night was moonless, with clouds scudding across the stars like smoke. Cole crouched behind a snowbank overlooking Black Creek, his breath forming small puffs in the frigid air. Beside him, Ellen lay flat against the ground, her father's Winchester steady in her hands.
See anything?
She whispered. Movement by the old mill. Cole murmured back. 3 horses, maybe 4. They'd returned to the cabin after giving their statements, only to find clear signs that someone had been watching the place. Fresh tracks, cigarette butts still warm. Red Pike's remaining gang members were regrouping. Sheriff Hale had wanted to post guards, but Cole knew these mountains. If Pike's men wanted to disappear into the wilderness and strike when least expected, no amount of town guards would stop them. We need to warn the sheriff about the gold shipment, Ellen said. That was the crux of it. Through Edwin's papers. They'd learned the real target tomorrow night. The North Star Mine would move their monthly gold to the railroad. Taking advantage of the cleared roads, the remaining gang members wouldn't give up that prize easily. A twig snapped in the forest behind them. Cole and Ellen rolled apart instinctively. Weapons coming up, but it was only old Pete, moving through the snow with surprising stealth for a man his age. Thought I'd find you two out here, Pete wheezed quietly. Sheriff's looking for you. Says to get back to town. Pronto. What's happened? Ellen asked. Edwin Pike's escaped. Deputy Watson was taking him to the courthouse when some men jumped them. Watson's hurt bad. Cole cursed under his breath. With Edwin free and his brother's men still loose, the situation had just gotten much worse. They made their way back carefully, alert for ambush. The town was in an uproar when they arrived, lanterns blazing. Men with rifles on every corner. Sheriff Hale met them at his office, his face grim. Glad you're safe, he said. We've got a problem. Besides Edwin escaping, Cole asked. The mine owners are panicking. They want to move the gold tonight instead of tomorrow, catch the gang off guard. But I don't have enough men to properly guard it, not with half my deputies searching for Edwin. It's a trap, Ellen said suddenly. They're counting on you to split your forces. The sheriff frowned. What do you mean? Think about it, Ellen continued. Edwin escapes just when you need every man for the gold shipment. They want you chasing shadows while they hit the real target. But if we don't move the gold, then move it, Cole interrupted, understanding Ellen's reasoning. Just not the way they expect. Over the next hour, they hatched a plan. It was risky, depending on deception and timing, but it might work, as they prepared. Cole found himself watching Ellen the way she studied maps with intense concentration, how she asked smart questions about routes and contingencies. She'd become his partner in every sense, and the thought of her in danger made his chest tight. I should go alone, he said when they had a moment apart. Ellen's eyes flashed. We've had this conversation. This is different. We're not defending a cabin now, we're going on the offensive. All the more reason you need someone watching your back. She checked her rifle with practiced movements. Besides, I'm the one who figured out their plan. I've earned the right to see it through. There was no arguing with that tone. Cole had learned to recognize when Ellen had made up her mind. As midnight approached, they put the plan into motion. A heavily guarded wagon left the North Star mine, taking the main road toward town. Sheriff Hale rode alongside with most of his remaining deputies, making a great show of vigilance. Meanwhile, Cole and Ellen, along with Pete and 2 trusted miners, loaded the real gold shipment onto pack mules and took the treacherous Black Creek Trail the same route they'd been scouting earlier. The path was narrow, winding between frozen creek beds and sheer rock faces. They moved without lanterns, trusting to what little starlight filtered through the clouds. Ellen rode behind Cole, and he could feel her tension in the silence. They were halfway down the trail when it happened. "Cole!" Ellen's warning came just as gunfire erupted from the rocks above. They scattered, finding cover as bullets whined through the air. The mules, well-trained mountain animals, huddled against the cliff face rather than bolting. "How many?" Pete called out. 4, maybe 5, Cole answered, trying to spot muzzle flashes in the darkness. They were pinned down, exactly where the gang wanted them, but they'd planned for this too. Ellen pulled out a small mirror, angling it to catch what light there was. 3 flashes, the signal. Moments later, answering lights appeared further down the trail. The empty wagon had been a decoy within a decoy. While most of the sheriff's men made a show of guarding it, others had circled back to set up an ambush of their own. Now the hunters became the hunted. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions as the sheriff's men closed in. The gang members, realizing they were surrounded, tried to flee. That's when Cole saw him, Edwin Pike, breaking from cover, running along the narrow trail toward where Ellen crouched. Without thinking, Cole left his position, intercepting Edwin before he could reach her. They collided hard, rolling in the snow. Edwin was desperate, fighting with the fury of a cornered animal. They grappled on the edge of the trail, the frozen creek gleaming far below. "You ruined everything," Edwin snarled, throwing a wild punch. "She was supposed to be mine, the gold, the town, everything." Cole didn't waste breath answering. He could hear Ellen calling his name, hear the continuing gunfire, but his world had narrowed to this struggle. Edwin pulled a knife, the blade flashing in the darkness. Cole caught his wrist, and they strained against each other. Then the edge crumbled. They both went over, sliding down the steep embankment toward the creek. Cole heard Ellen scream his name. He managed to grab a protruding root, jerking to a stop, but Edwin continued falling, his cry cut short by a sickening crack on the ice below. "Cole!" Ellen was suddenly there, reaching down from the trail. "Give me your hand." The root was giving way, dirt cascading around him. Cole reached up, their fingers touching. "I can't reach." "Yes, you can." Ellen lay flat, stretching further. Behind her, Pete appeared with a rope. "Don't let go," Ellen commanded, her eyes locked on his. "Don't you dare let go." With Ellen pulling and Pete manning the rope, they hauled Cole back up. He collapsed on the trail, gasping, Ellen's arms tight around him. "I thought—" She pulled back, anger replacing relief. "That was incredibly foolish. He was heading for you." Cole managed. "I had my rifle." "I know, I just—" He cupped her face in his dirty hands. "I couldn't let him near you." Her anger melted. "Oh, Cole." Around them, the fight was ending. The gang members who'd survived were surrendering, faced with superior numbers and position. In the light of hastily lit lanterns, they could see Edwin's still form on the ice below. Sheriff Hale appeared, taking in the scene. "Everyone all right?" "Thanks to Miss Reed," Cole said. "She saved my life." "Seems to be a habit with you two," the sheriff observed. "Saving each other." As dawn broke over the mountains, they delivered the gold safely to town. The gang was finished. Those who survived would face justice. The threat that had hung over Cole for 3 years was finally lifted. The truth of Silver Creek revealed through captured documents that proved his innocence. But standing in the morning light, still feeling the phantom sensation of falling, Cole realized something else had changed, the careful distance he'd maintained for years. The walls he'd built Ellen had broken through them all. "What happens now?" Ellen asked quietly as they watched the sunrise paint the peaks gold. "Now," Cole turned to face her fully. "Now I ask if a schoolmarm who can outshoot outlaws and save stubborn cowboys might consider staying in Larkspur Gulch, permanent-like." "That depends," Ellen said, a smile tugging at her lips. "Is this a professional inquiry about my teaching position?" "Not exactly." "Then what exactly are you asking, Mr. Hart?" Cole took her hands. Right there on Main Street where everyone could see. "I'm asking if you'd consider making this partnership. We've got something more official." Ellen's smile bloomed full and bright. "Cole Hart, are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we talk about proposing," he said carefully, "after a proper courtship. The kind where I don't have to sleep on the floor." She laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet town. "A courtship where no one's shooting at us. Preferably. Where we can have unnecessary conversations whenever we want. Especially those." "Then yes," Ellen said simply. "Yes to all of it." As Cole pulled her close, he spotted old Pete grinning from the sheriff's office doorway. The old man called out, loud enough for half the town to hear. "I told you they forced the cowboy to share a cabin with the old Maid. And she turned his life into heaven." This time, Cole couldn't argue. Looking down at Ellen Brave, brilliant, beautiful Ellen. He knew Pete had spoken nothing but truth. The crisis had passed, the gold was safe, and justice had been served. But more importantly, two people who'd thought themselves forever alone had found something worth fighting for each other. And if that wasn't heaven, Cole didn't know what was. The church bells rang out across Larkspur Gulch, their bronze voices carrying news of deliverance through the cold morning air. Snow had begun falling again, but gently this time, like a benediction over the town that had weathered so much. Ellen stood in the church vestibule, shaking snowflakes from her shawl, while Cole spoke quietly with Sheriff Hale near the door. The service had been one of thanksgiving for lives saved, justice served, and the gang that had terrorized their community finally broken. "Miss Reed," Reverend Whitfield approached, his thin face warmer than she'd ever seen it. "I owe you an apology. When this arrangement began, I had concerns about propriety, but your actions, both yours and Mr. Hart's, have shown true Christian virtue." "Thank you, Reverend," Ellen replied, though she couldn't help adding, "though I believe virtue exists outside church walls as well as within them." The minister's smile was rueful. "Indeed, a lesson I'm still learning." Across the vestibule, Mrs. Thornton held court with her ladies' society, their voices carrying clearly. "Of course, I never believed those terrible rumors about Mr. Hart." "Mrs. Thornton declared, apparently forgetting her very vocal suspicions of just days ago. "And dear Miss Reed, such a pillar of our community." Ellen caught Cole's eye, and they shared a moment of silent amusement. The same tongues that had wagged against them now sang their praises. Such was the way of small towns. "Miss Reed," young Tom Sampson tugged at her skirt. "Ma says to ask if you'll still be teaching come spring." Ellen knelt to the boy's level. "Why wouldn't I be?" Tom shuffled his feet. "Billy Morrison said you'd probably get married now and have to stop teaching." "Well, Billy Morrison doesn't know everything, does he?" Ellen said gently. "I'll be there come spring, I promise." The boy beamed and ran off. When Ellen stood, she found Cole watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. They stepped out into the falling snow, but instead of heading toward the cabin, Cole steered them down Main Street. The town was bustling despite the weather word of the gang's capture had brought people out to share the news and celebrate their safety. At the Mercantile, Mister. Hartley rushed out to shake Cole's hand. Hart heard what you did up on Black Creek. That was some riding.
Team effort, Cole said. But the store owner was already pressing a wrapped package into Ellen's hands. For you, Miss Reed? My Martha says any woman brave enough to face down outlaws deserves something nice.
Before Ellen could properly thank him, they were surrounded by well-wishers. The baker's wife brought fresh bread. The blacksmith offered to shoe Cole's horse for free, and even crusty Doc Morrison tipped his hat respectfully. But not everyone was celebrating. As they passed the sheriff's office, a small group of Edwin Pike's former associates stood in heated discussion. They fell silent at Cole and Ellen's approach, their faces dark with resentment.
This ain't over, one muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Sheriff Hale emerged from his office, badge glinting. Actually, Sykes, it is over, unless you'd like to join your friends in jail.
The men dispersed, but Ellen felt Cole tense beside her.
They'll cause trouble, he said quietly.
Let them try. Sheriff Hale replied. This town's had enough of bullies and rumor-mongers. Speaking of which, he turned to Ellen. The town council's meeting this afternoon. There's a proposal to formally commend you both. Maybe even some reward money from the mine owners. We don't need, Cole began. You need to let folks show their gratitude. The sheriff interrupted. It's how communities heal. Besides, he added with a grin, I hear there might be a teaching contract in it for Miss Reed. Permanent position. Better pay. Ellen's breath caught. A permanent position would mean security. Roots. A real future in Larkspur Gulch. They continued their walk, eventually reaching the schoolhouse. Ellen produced her key, and they stepped inside the small building. It was cold, the stove unlit for days, but Ellen moved through the space with obvious affection, straightening desks and checking on primers left behind in the evacuation.
This is what I came west for, she said softly. To make a difference, to matter. You do matter.
Cole said, More than you know. She turned to face him, and something in his expression made her pulse quicken. Cole! He took a deep breath.
Ellen, I've been thinking about what Pete said, about paradise and such. He wasn't wrong, but not in the way folks think.
What do you mean? Cole moved closer, taking her hands.
These past days, facing danger with you, working together, even just
talking by the fire. It wasn't paradise because it was easy. It was paradise because I wasn't alone anymore. Because I had a partner who trusted me, who saw me for who I really am.
Cole, I know we talked about a proper courtship,
he continued quickly. And if that's what you want, I'll wait. I'll court you proper, with Sunday dinners and church socials and all of it. But Ellen, I already know what I want. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're there. I want to face whatever comes, storms, outlaws, gossip, anything with you beside me. I want... Ellen silenced him by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. It was their first real kiss. There in the little schoolhouse with snow falling outside and the scent of chalk and old books around them. When they finally parted, both were breathless. I don't need a long courtship. Ellen said, I've seen who you are when it matters most. I've seen your courage, your kindness, your integrity. What more could Sunday dinners tell me? So you're saying...
I'm saying yes, Cole Hart, to all of it, to building a life together, to facing whatever comes, to being your partner in every sense.
Cole's smile was like sunrise over the mountains. He kissed her again, longer this time, until they heard giggling from outside the window. Several of Ellen's students had gathered, drawn by curiosity. Miss Reed's getting married, Lucy Morrison shouted, and the children scattered to spread the news. Well, Ellen laughed against Cole's shoulder.
I suppose the whole town will know within the hour?
Good, Cole said firmly. I want everyone to know that the finest woman in Colorado has agreed to marry me. The town council meeting that afternoon was unlike any Larkspur Gulch had seen. The small courthouse was packed, people standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. Judge Blackwood had stayed to preside, lending an air of official authority to the proceeding. "We're here to recognize extraordinary bravery," the judge began. "Cole Hart and Miss Ellen Reed risked their lives to protect this community. Their actions saved not just gold, but lives." The formal commendations were read. The reward money announced a generous sum from the grateful mine owners. But then Mrs. Martha Hartley stood up, speaking for the Ladies' Society. "We have another proposal," she said, glancing at Mrs. Thornton, who nodded reluctantly. "The teaching position should be Miss Reed's permanently, with proper salary and housing, and—" She paused. "We believe the restriction against married women teaching should be lifted. Times are changing, and we need to change with them." The debate that followed was spirited but brief. The events of recent days had shifted opinions. When the vote was called, it passed overwhelmingly. Ellen felt tears prick her eyes. She could have both her calling and her marriage. It was more than she dared hope for. But there was one more surprise. Old Pete stood up, clearing his throat loudly. "Got something to say," he announced. "That old ranger cabin where all this started, I own it. Inherited it from my brother. I'd like to give it to these two as a wedding present. Seems fitting, somehow. The cabin where they'd been forced together, where they'd discovered each other, where their partnership had begun, it would be theirs." As the meeting broke up in a flood of congratulations, Cole and Ellen found themselves at the center of a community transformed. The suspicion and gossip that had defined their early days in town had been replaced by genuine warmth and acceptance. But it was a private moment that Ellen would remember most from that day. As the sun set and the celebrations continued at the hotel, she and Cole slipped away to the schoolhouse porch, there, with the mountains glowing pink and gold in the dying light. He gave her something wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a simple gold ring, nothing fancy, but perfect. "It was my mother's," Cole said quietly. "Been carrying it for years, never knowing, but I think she would have loved you." Ellen slipped the ring onto her finger, where it fit as if made for her. "I'll treasure it always." "There's an inscription inside," Cole added, suddenly shy. "Maybe it's silly, but—" Ellen removed the ring to read the tiny words etched in the gold, "Together or not at all." "Oh, Cole." She slipped the ring back on, sealing the promise. "It's perfect. We're perfect. Not because we're without flaws, but because we're better together than apart." As they stood there, snow beginning to fall once more, Ellen thought about the strange path that had brought them to this moment. Society had forced them together, expecting scandal or disaster. Instead, they'd found strength in each other, trust forged in danger, love grown from respect and partnership. Tomorrow, there would be wedding plans to make, a cabin to prepare for proper living, lessons to plan for eager students. There would still be those who whispered and those who wished them ill. The frontier was still wild, winters still harsh, and life uncertain. But tonight, standing with Cole's arms around her and his mother's ring on her finger, Ellen knew they could face it all. They'd proven that together. They could weather any storm. The bells of Larkspur Gulch rang out again, this time in celebration, and throughout the town, people would remember and retell the story of the cowboy and the schoolmarm who'd saved their town and found salvation in each other. The forced arrangement had indeed become paradise, not an easy paradise of endless summer, but the hard-won paradise of two souls who'd found their match and chosen to build something beautiful from the timber of trust and the foundation of love. Spring came early to Colorado that year, painting the valley in shades of green and gold. The snow retreated to the highest peaks, and wild flowers pushed through the damp earth like promises kept. Cole stood on the rise overlooking their new property, watching the sunrise turn the mountains into towers of rose and amber. Their land sat at the edge of town, 40 acres Cole had purchased with the reward money and savings from selling his mountain holdings. It was perfect, close enough to the schoolhouse for Ellen's daily walk, far enough from town for the privacy they both valued. The spot he'd chosen for their home commanded a view of the entire valley. "Already planning the barn," Ellen's voice came from behind him, warm with affection. Cole turned, his breath catching as it still did when he saw her. 6 weeks married, and the sight of Ellen in the morning light her hair loose around her shoulders. Wearing one of his old shirts over her dress still felt like a miracle. Thinking about where to put the corral, he admitted, pulling her close. "Want the horses to have the morning sun." "Always thinking of the animals first," she teased, but her eyes were soft. "What about the house?" Cole gestured to the level ground where stakes already marked the corners. 2 bedrooms to start, with room to add on. A proper kitchen with windows facing east so you'll have good light for your morning coffee making. He paused, grinning. "Though I'm hoping marriage might improve your coffee." Ellen swatted his arm. "My coffee is perfectly fine. You've been drinking it for months without complaint." "Without much complaint," he corrected, dodging another swat. They stood together, imagining walls and rooms where now there was only grass and possibility. The ranger cabin had served them well through the winter, but they both wanted something built with their own hands, shaped by their own dreams. Mr. and Mrs. Hart. Young Tom Sampson came running up the hill, his sister Lucy trailing behind. "Ma sent us to fetch you, says the lumber wagon's arriving today." It was true. By noon, half the town had gathered to watch the delivery. Wagon after wagon rolled in, loaded with fresh-cut pine from the mountain mills. The driver, a grizzled man named Josiah, handed Cole the manifest with a grin. "Heard you two had quite the winter," he said. "Good to see something fine coming from all that trouble." As they unloaded, more neighbors appeared. The baker brought lunch for the workers. The blacksmith offered his expertise for the hardware. Even Mrs. Thornton arrived with her ladies' society, bearing quilts and preserves for the new household. "A proper home needs proper furnishings," she declared, as if she hadn't once been Ellen's fiercest critic. Ellen accepted the gifts graciously, though Cole caught her hiding a smile when Mrs. Thornton began giving unsolicited advice about kitchen placement. Sheriff Hale arrived as they were sorting lumber, bringing unexpected news. "Got a letter from the territorial governor," he announced. "Seems word of our little adventure reached Denver. They're sending a federal marshal to establish a permanent office here." "More law," old Pete spat tobacco juice. "Town's getting downright civilized." "That's the idea," the sheriff replied. "Railroads planning to extend the spur line, with the mines producing steady and no more gang troubles. Larkspur Gulch is set to grow." Cole felt Ellen's hand slip into his. Growth meant change, and change could be double-edged. But looking at their neighbors, people who'd come together in crisis and chosen community over suspicion, he felt hopeful. The house raising began the next week. It seemed the entire town wanted to help, turning work into celebration. Men framed walls while women organized meals. Children ran messages and fetched water. By sunset of the first day, the skeleton of their home stood proud against the sky. "It's really happening," Ellen marveled that night as they sat by their campfire, the ranger cabin too far for the daily commute. "Having second thoughts?" Cole asked. "Never." She leaned against him, fitting perfectly into his side. "Though I do wonder what my mother would think." Her properly raised daughter, sleeping under the stars with her cowboy husband while building a house with her own hands. What do you think she'd say? Ellen was quiet for a moment. I hope she'd be proud. She always told me to be true to myself, even when it wasn't easy or proper. Then she'd definitely be proud, Cole said firmly. "You're the truest person I know." The next days blurred together in a rhythm of hammering and sawing, lifting and fitting. Ellen proved surprisingly skilled with tools, having helped her father with repairs in her youth. She worked alongside the men when not teaching, her students often stopping by after school to watch the progress. It was on the 4th day that the past intruded on their happiness. Cole was up on the roof beams when he spotted riders approaching 3 men in city clothes, led by a familiar figure he'd hoped never to see again. Marcus Wells, president of Silver Creek Bank. "Hart," Wells called up, his voice carrying the same superior tone Cole remembered. "Need a word." Cole climbed down slowly, Ellen appearing at his side as if summoned. The townspeople working on the house drew closer, protective. "Mr. Wells," Cole said evenly, "you're a long way from Silver Creek." "Yes, well," Wells dismounted, his expensive boots immediately dusty. "Circumstances have changed. With Edwin Pike's records recovered and his brother's testimony, certain facts have come to light about the Silver Creek incident." "Facts we've known all along," Sheriff Hale interjected. Having arrived with several deputies, Wells's jaw tightened. "Perhaps. Nevertheless, the bank wishes to make amends. The directors have authorized me to offer compensation for any inconvenience Mr. Hart experienced." "Inconvenience?" Ellen's voice could have frozen flame. 3 years of suspicion and isolation being driven from his home. You call that inconvenience? "Ellen," Cole said quietly, but she wasn't finished. "No, Cole. This man and his bank destroyed your reputation for their own convenience. They needed someone to blame. And you were easy a loner without powerful friends." She stepped forward, and Wells actually backed up. "What's changed? Mr. Wells, did you find the real thief among your own employees, or are you just afraid of what a federal investigation might reveal?" Wells flushed deep red. "I'm not at liberty to discuss ongoing inquiries. I'm simply here to offer Mr. Hart a settlement, $20,000, in exchange for signing this document stating he holds no claims against the bank." The sum was staggering more than most men saw in a lifetime. The work on the house had stopped, everyone waiting to see what Cole would do. Cole took the paper Wells offered, read it carefully, then handed it back unsigned. No, Wells sputtered. "That's a fortune." "That's hush money," Cole corrected. "You want to buy my silence about how your bank operates, about how you were so eager to blame an outsider that you never investigated your own people." He smiled grimly. "I've got something worth more than your money now. I've got my good name back, a wife who believes in me, and a community that knows my character. Can't put a price on that." "You're making a mistake," Wells warned. "Only mistake I made was running from your lies instead of fighting them." Cole replied, "Now get off my land." Wells left in a fury of dust and threats about lawyers. But the damage was done. The celebratory mood had dimmed, reminded of how quickly fortune could turn. That evening, Ellen found Cole sitting on the foundation stones, staring at the sunset. $20,000, she said, settling beside him. "That would have built quite a house." "Regretting your choice of husband." "Every day," she said solemnly, then laughed at his expression. "Oh, Cole, I regret nothing except that you had to face their accusations alone for so long." "I wasn't ready then," Cole admitted. "Too angry, too proud, would have taken their money and run, probably. But now—" He gestured at the half-built house. "The town spread below. Now I've got reasons to stay and fight if needed." "We have reasons," Ellen corrected. "Partners. Remember." The house building resumed with renewed energy, as if the community wanted to prove that Wells and his money meant nothing compared to neighbors helping neighbors. Within 2 weeks, walls rose and a roof took shape. Windows arrived from Denver, glass carefully wrapped and precious as jewels. It was while installing those windows that Ellen made her announcement. "I think we'll need that second bedroom sooner than planned," she said casually, holding glass steady as Cole set it in place. "Oh, you expecting many visitors?" "Just one." She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. "Due around Christmas, Doc Morrison thinks—" Cole nearly dropped the window. "Ellen, we're going to be parents, yes." Her smile was radiant but nervous. "I know it's soon,"
And with the house not even finished. Cole silenced her with a kiss that would have scandalized Mrs. Thornton if she'd seen it. It's perfect. You're perfect. He laughed, joy bubbling up like a spring. We're having a baby. His shout brought workers running. And soon the news spread. Old Pete produced a hidden flask for toasts. The women surrounded Ellen with congratulations and advice. Even the children sensed celebration, dancing around the construction site. That night, in the ranger cabin that had sheltered the beginning of their love, Cole held Ellen close, his hand protective over where their child grew. I want to name him after your father if it's a boy, he said. Her after your mother if it's a girl. Ellen countered, though perhaps we should finish building her a home first. Our home, Cole corrected, pressing a kiss to her hair. Built with our hands, filled with our love. However long it takes, whatever comes, we'll face it. Together, Ellen finished. Always together. Outside, spring peepers sang in the darkness, and the frame of their house stood sentinel against the stars. It was more than lumber and nails, it was a declaration, a promise, a future taking shape one board at a time. The ranger cabin had been their unexpected beginning. Now, with calloused hands and full hearts, they were building something chosen, something earned, something entirely their own. And in the growing quiet of the Colorado night, with Ellen safe in his arms and their child safe within her, Cole knew that old Pete had been right all along. They'd forced him to share a cabin with the old Maid, and she had indeed turned his life into heaven. Not a perfect heaven that didn't exist this side of eternity, but a working heaven, built of trust and timber, love and labor, strong enough to weather any storm. It was more than enough. It was everything. 10 years had painted silver in Cole's dark hair and etched laugh lines around Ellen's eyes, but the July afternoon found them as united as ever. They stood once again at the old ranger cabin by Black Creek, though time had weathered its logs and settled its foundation. Hard to believe it all started here, Ellen said, her hand finding Cole's as naturally as breathing. Their 3 children played by the creek James, age 9, with his father's quiet intensity, Sarah, 7, who had inherited her mother's determination and aim with a slingshot, and little Margaret, 5, whose laughter rang like church bells through the pines. Mama, why are we here? Sarah asked, skipping stones across the water with practiced ease. Because sometimes, Ellen replied, it's important to remember where you came from. The cabin stood empty now, old Pete having passed 3 winters ago, leaving it to them in his will with a note that simply said, for where it all began. They'd kept it maintained, though they'd never moved back. Their home on the edge of town, expanded twice now, was where they'd built their life. Tell us again about the storm, James requested, though he knew the story by heart. Cole settled on the old porch steps, still sturdy despite the years. It was the worst blizzard anyone had seen. And Mama shot at wolves, Margaret interrupted, bouncing with excitement. She did, Cole agreed, pulling the little girl onto his lap. Your mama was the bravest woman in Colorado. Still is. Ellen sat beside them, Sarah leaning against her side. Your father was rather brave himself, though foolish at times. Like when he fell off the cliff, James asked. Especially then, Ellen said, shooting Cole a look that still held echoes of that long-ago fear. They spent the afternoon at the cabin, the children exploring while Cole and Ellen repaired loose boards and cleared debris. It was good work, honest work, the kind that had built their life together. As the sun began its descent, painting the mountains in shades of amber and rose, they prepared to leave, but Cole had one more stop in mind. The overlook, Ellen guessed when he turned the wagon up the familiar trail. From the ridge, they could see it all, Larkspur Gulch spread below, 3 times the size it had been that fateful winter. The railroad station gleamed with fresh paint. New businesses lined streets that had once been dirt tracks. The schoolhouse had grown too,
with 3 teachers now, though Ellen remained the principal and taught the older students. "Look there." Cole pointed to a distant speck. "That's the Sampson Ranch. Tom's doing well with those cattle I helped him start." "And there's Lucy's house," Sarah added, spotting her best friend's home. "She said her mama's having another baby." Ellen smiled. "The town's growing up, just like you all are." "Do you miss it, Mama?" James asked. "The old days?" Ellen considered. "I miss the simplicity sometimes, but no, I wouldn't trade what we have now for anything." "Even when Billy Morrison puts frogs in your desk," Sarah giggled. "Even then," Ellen assured her. "Though Billy's grandfather did the same thing to me my first year teaching, some things never change." They watched the sun sink lower, Cole's arms around his family. The distant mountains stood eternal, but everything else bore the mark of time and progress. Where once there had been suspicion and isolation, now there was community. Where once they'd been strangers forced together by circumstance, now they were the bedrock of each other's world. "Papa," Margaret said sleepily, "will you teach me to ride like you tomorrow?" "If your mother says it's safe," Cole replied, knowing Ellen worried but also trusted his judgment with their children. "She's old enough," Ellen conceded. "But on Buttercup, not that wild Mustang you've been training." As they prepared to leave, Cole noticed Ellen had grown quiet, her hand pressed to her middle in a gesture he recognized. "Ellen?" he asked softly. She smiled, that same radiant expression she'd worn 3 times before. "I was going to wait until tonight to tell you, but it seems fitting here, where everything began." Cole's eyes widened. "Another Christmas again. Doc Morrison says he's threatening to retire if we have any more." Cole laughed, pulling her close while the children chattered excitedly about another sibling. 4 children would mean more additions to the house, more chaos, more love than he'd ever imagined possible when he'd been that solitary cowboy riding into town. As they made their way home in the gathering dusk, Cole reflected on the journey, the forced cabin arrangement that had seemed like disaster, the blizzard that had trapped them but also freed them to see each other truly, the dangers they'd faced that had forged them into partners, the choice to stay and build rather than run. "What are you thinking?" Ellen asked, noticing his contemplative mood. "About Pete," Cole admitted, "about what he said that day." Ellen smiled, which time he said many memorable things. "About you turning my life into heaven." Cole said, "He saw it before we did." "Perhaps," Ellen agreed. "Or perhaps he just recognized 2 stubborn people who needed a push." Back home, as they tucked the children into bed and settled by their own fireplace, Ellen pulled out a letter she'd been saving. "From the Territorial Board of Education," she explained. "They want me to write a curriculum guide for frontier schools, and—" She paused, eyes sparkling. "They've offered you a position training security for the new railway expansion." Cole took the letter, reading carefully. It was good money, honest work that would use his skills without taking him far from home. "What do you think?" Ellen asked. "I think," Cole said slowly, "that we've come a long way from that cabin by Black Creek." "But not so far that we've forgotten who we are," Ellen added. "Or what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, the fire crackling, the house settling around them with familiar sounds. Somewhere in the walls they'd built with their own hands, in the laughter of their children, in the respect of their community, was the answer to every prayer they'd never known to speak. The clock on the mantel, a wedding gift from the Ladies' Society, chimed 10. Time for bed, for the rhythm of another day in their chosen life. But first, Cole pulled Ellen close. Speaking the words that had become their tradition each night, they forced the cowboy to share a cabin with the old maid. "And she turned his life into heaven," Ellen finished, smiling against his shoulder. It had started as a joke, become a promise, and remained a truth. Not a perfect heaven. There had been sick children, hard winters, crop failures, and losses along the way.
but a real heaven, built one choice at a time, strong enough to shelter generations. Outside, Black Creek ran clear and constant toward the valley, carrying snowmelt from the eternal peaks. The old ranger cabin stood empty but not forgotten, a monument to unexpected beginnings. The town slept peaceful, no longer haunted by gangs or suspicion. And in the house on the edge of town, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances held tight to what they'd built, grateful for the storm that had forced them together and the love that had kept them that way. The West was changing, growing civilized and safe. But some things remained wild and free, like the love between a cowboy and a schoolmarm who'd refused to be what the world expected, choosing instead to be exactly who they were, partners, parents, and living proof that sometimes the best things in life come disguised as disasters. In the distance, a wolf howled, not a threat now, just a reminder of wildness that would always exist at the edges of civilization. Cole and Ellen listened, remembering another night, another howl, when they'd stood together against the darkness and discovered they were stronger united than alone. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys, but tonight, in the heaven they'd built from timber and trust, they were home. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about Cole and Ellen's journey. If you enjoyed this tale from the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night. Give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means the world and helps keep these frontier tales alive.